Welcome into the Daily Illini Sports Podcast. It's Josh Pietsch and Carson Gourdie, joined with Mike Barber of the Richmond Times-Dispatch covering the Virginia Cavaliers. Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So how long have you been covering Virginia, and what's the change been like from a guy like Bronco Mendenhall then immediately going to Tony Elliott from Clemson?
Yeah, this will be my sixth year with UVA. I've been down here in Virginia for 20 years now, covering some collection of Virginia Tech, some James Madison in there. The change from Tony to Bronco has been interesting because one, Bronco's such a different dude, right? Like I've never covered anybody like him, and I probably never will cover anybody like him again. So that was different. And the other thing is, guys, normally when you have a new coach, it's because something went poorly, at least at Virginia, right? And that's not the case here. Things were going well with Bronco. The last 2 years weren't fantastic, but he had built the program back up to where it was a regular bowl participant. They won a division title a couple of years back. So it was interesting to see how are the fans going to embrace a new coach when he's not taken over a bad program. He's taken over an okay program, so there's some expectations. I think Tony Elliott's done some nice things off the field in terms of relations with alumni. He's got Chris Slade, Marcus Hagans, and Clint Sintum, who are kind of UVA greats on the staff. That's helped. I think he's embraced some of the campus and the culture. But, you guys know, at the end of the day, Tony Elliott's going to be judged by whether or not he wins. And they want him to win as much or more than Bronco. And that's kind of where the bar is.
So were you surprised at all that they didn't go with a more defensive head coach? Because Bronco was great, but they gave up a lot of points last year. For example, like the most notable being BYU was at 66 points at their place. So was going with an offensive guy surprising to you at all? Or did you like the hire of Tony?
I think what Bronco showed them was, because he's a defensive guy, it's all about the staff recruiting. Bronco's a defensive guy, and he's got this offense that's scoring 42, 44, 48 points every time out. So I don't think that was a major consideration, although they did interview and talk with Anthony Poindexter, who's a co-DC at Penn State and another UVA alum. So they had a guy on either side of the ball. But at the end of the day, I think that's more of an NFL mindset. Like if your offense stinks, go get an offense guy. College, because you're hoping to really build something long term. I think they were more concerned with getting the right guy on top and then supporting him. He went out and he's got a staff on both sides of the ball that is very varied. It's not one of those deals where if you bring in an existing head coach, he's probably going to bring a big chunk of his staff. But because Tony was a coordinator, he ended up with a staff of guys from all over. So I think they addressed some of the defense in hiring the staff.
So last year, the run defense, that was a big struggle for the Cavaliers, in playing against Illinois. Chase Brown just had 199 yards against Indiana, over 100 yards against Wyoming. What can the Cavaliers do, to kind of slow down Illinois' rushing attack?
Yeah, I think if you're Chase Brown and you watch tape of that Richmond opener for Virginia, you're like licking your lips to get to this game, right? I mean, Virginia was still not very good in run defense. Now, schematically, they've changed a lot of things with John Rudzinski, the new coordinator. This defense is designed to give up some yards, tighten up in the red zone, and not give up big plays. Against Richmond, they didn't give up any big plays. The longest pass play, I think, was 17 yards. So they were really good in regards of not giving up chunk yardage and they were decent in the red zone. The problem with that run defense is now you play a bigger, stronger offensive line, and you play a more capable running back. So where you were giving up more than you wanted, but not devastating runs, do those become devastating runs against Illinois? Now, the mantra we've heard from the Virginia guys is, hey, that was the first time out, really first time with some live tackling in a while. Josh Ahern, one of their inside linebackers, was suspended for the first half. Their yards per carry number did go down in the second half when Ahern was able to play. He had a targeting call in the regular season finale last year. So I think if you're Virginia, you're hoping that you're better than you showed against Richmond. If you're a fan, you're probably thinking like, well, you weren't very good against the run last year, and you didn't blow me away against Richmond. So I think fans are probably a little wary of that. Virginia, they claim that they're confident that their best run defense is still ahead of them.
So what kind of defense should we expect? Like, Is Elliott going to have his defensive coordinator dial up, blitzes from secondaries, from linebackers, from corners? Like, what should we expect to see from Virginia?
I would label, and granted, I've only seen them for a game, but judging by practice and just from talking to the guys, I think it's a very conservative defense, right? Radzinski says it's a 4-3. It's kind of 3 down linemen with a stand-up edge rusher, but they're really designed to get pressure with those front 4 and sometimes bringing an inside backer. They're not very exotic with their blitz package. They don't want to give up big plays. So they don't take a lot of gambles of sending extra bodies. They want to get to the quarterback with 4 or 5 guys. They want to be in position to stop the run. And they want to play almost, it'd be like we were out in the yard, like deep thirds. They just want to keep everybody in front of them in the secondary. And now they've got some good athletes at safety who are able to come up and make that defense look not so passive. I don't want to make it sound like they're just in a prevent defense for 4 quarters, but they're not going to get crazy with the blitz calls. They want to keep everything in front of them, and then third down, maybe dial up some pressure with an inside backer.
So you mentioned the corners in the secondary for Virginia. Illinois' got pretty good wide receiver in Isaiah Williams. Pretty good when he's catching the ball. At least he's a deep threat when he catches the ball in the short. He can get really crafty and run for a first down. Do you think it's going to be difficult for Virginia to prep for a guy like him?
I think the defense is designed for a guy like him. The problem is, does that mean you stop him? Probably not. This feels like a kind of game where a guy like Williams could catch 10 or 12 balls, and Virginia will call it successful if it's 10 catches for 76 yards. But if it's 10 catches for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, Virginia probably doesn't have a chance. So again, it's all about limiting big plays. Okay, a 7-yard catch on 3rd and 9 is okay. A 7-yard catch on 3rd and 2, not great. So it's very situational. Again, I don't think at the end of the day they're going to be staring at the box score if it's Virginia. A guy like Williams may catch a ton of balls, but when do they come? Is it red zone? They're big on red zone, big on 3rd down conversions, and not giving up the big plays.
The one undisputed thing is that Virginia has one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. Like Armstrong, do you expect him to even elevate from how he played junior year? Because last year, dude, he killed Illinois. I think he threw 400 yards or something.
It's a very different offense than last year, but you're right. He is better. He is a better player. He goes through his reads and his progressions more quickly. He's more comfortable with things that are unfolding in the game. Now, they're not going to ask him to throw 50 times. So I think at the end of the year, again, kind of what I just said about the stat sheet for this game, I think it's the same thing for the season. I think we're going to get to the end of the year and be like, man, Brennan Armstrong didn't throw for as many yards or as many touchdowns, but maybe UVA is a better team. That they're asking him to take more underneath stuff. When I talked to Brennan after the Richmond game, his number one criticism of himself was he was still in last year's mindset. And there were times where he could dump the ball underneath or find somebody on a crossing route, and instead he was trying to go over the top. And that's not what they want from him. The thing about Brennan Armstrong is that danger is always going to be there, right? If you bust a coverage, if you get beat on the outside, he's going to burn you. He's got a big arm, and he's got a really good feel for seeing the whole field. But they're asking him to be, it's funny because of how good he is, they're asking him to be almost more of a game manager, right? Throw some short passes, move the chains, keep possession, don't leave that defense out there. So it's a different ask of Brennan Armstrong, but he's a better player than he was last year. And, we saw it in this game. He threw a 50-something touchdown pass to Lavelle Davis. He took off on a 60-something yard touchdown run. And the guy can still beat you with his arm and his legs. It's just they're asking him to do it in a slightly different way.
So why don't they want to go vertical as much? Are they trying to help out the Virginia defense by keeping them off the field? Is that the reason?
I think it's a mindset. Yeah, I think they want to have longer drives, sustained drives. They're not going to pass on 80-yard touchdown bombs if they're there. But I think last year there were times where it was forced. And because of how good Dontavian Wicks is, because of how good Keaton Thompson is, and because of how good Armstrong is, it worked, right? They were like, okay, we're desperate, go do something. And then it worked. And everyone was like, great offense. And not that it was a bad offense, but I think this is a little bit more, hey, let's earn our way down the field, just like the defense is trying to make opponents. Let's earn it. Let's keep the ball. Let's possess it. Let's have more run pass balance. And if somebody makes a mistake, let's take advantage. Let's hit them with the 80-yard touchdown pass because of a defensive mistake, not because of a desperation great play. And again, now I say that if they fall behind 21-3, you're going to see that old approach of air it out and go make something happen.
So in week one, Armstrong completed passes to 7 different receivers. Granted, that's an Atlantic 10 defense, right? Kind of the same thing happened to Illinois in their first game against Wyoming. So how deep really, is the Cavalier receiving core, and how many guys can Illinois expect to see?
And the offensive line too. I know they're making, a lot of replacements. How are they acting on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The biggest problem right now, guys, is depth. And they had a couple of drops from the receiving core. They had a fumble from Dontavian Wicks. And when I talked to Tony Elliott and Des Kitchings, he said part of it, and not making an excuse, but they said part of it was fatigue. Like those guys are playing too many snaps. They've got 4 really great wide receivers. They need 6 or 7. Now they threw the ball to Paris Jones, the running back out of the backfield. They threw the ball to Grant Mish, the tight end. So they're trying to take some of that pressure off, but these guys are playing a ton of snaps. Same thing on the offensive line. 5 new starters. 4 of them were making their first ever start in college. That's rough. Now, they were fine against Richmond. Illinois is like twice the size up front. How are they going to adjust now, second time out? Certainly, it's better for Virginia that they've got a game under their belt. In fact, I just posted an article about the linemen saying, hey, we're glad we got a game out there. There's no preseason in college. They're glad they got some live action, but there's not a lot of depth at receiver. There's not a lot of depth on the offensive line. Those guys need to both play well and also not wear down. And that's going to be tough. We talked a lot this week about the Big Ten mentality of being physical. There's 4 guys on this team, guys, who played in the Big Ten. There's a transfer from Michigan State, a transfer from Wisconsin, a transfer from Minnesota, and a transfer from Indiana. So they know the mindset in the Big Ten, power football, wear you down, all of that. And this team is not very deep. So that is a big concern.
Yeah. So, going to talk a little spread here. I believe it started at Illinois -3.5, went up to 4.5, and now I see it sitting at 4 at ESPN, but it stayed pretty much the same. Do you expect the Cavaliers to cover, Illinois to cover, maybe a score prediction? What are your expectations for the game?
Yeah, I still have probably not a great feel for this Virginia team, so it's hard. I do think they'll cover. I mean, I see that spread just from a Vegas standpoint. Usually get about 2.5, 3 points for being the home team. So puts this at about a 1.5 point game in terms of the matchup. It's just hard to know. Could I see Virginia getting completely overwhelmed on the trenches by Illinois? I absolutely could. And then I go back to last year's game and think, wow, Virginia was so far ahead. It's really hard to know what you're going to get. My prediction is that Illinois wins a close game in this one, that Virginia is able to run the ball some, hold up a little more than we're expecting, but it took them a while to get their run game going against Richmond. I think that'll happen again. And then they faded late because, again, they're not very deep. That's kind of what I see in this one. It's a tight ball game. Maybe Virginia hits a big play. I think they'll be okay containing Illinois, but I don't know that they'll be able to stop them from marching down the field and scoring. I don't think they'll give up chunk yardage. So I think this is really close, comes down to the end. I see it like a field goal game. The only way I'm wrong is if Illinois' defense can't control Armstrong. So that's really the wild card.
And he's going to be the best player on the field. So that's going to be a big positive for
it's what can Armstrong do, and then it's what can Brown do against that UVA run defense, right? If he goes for 300 yards and 4 scores, I don't like Virginia's chances. If they are able to bottle him up a little bit and Armstrong hits big plays, obviously that's the formula. And that's part of why, if you're Armstrong and UVA, you want to keep the football. You don't want to give Brown a ton of time to wear down your defense.
Yeah, I think we both think it's going to be a pretty close game too. Illinois fans, man, we go through a lot, so no one really knows what to expect. It's a home team, or it's a home game. We're favored, but
we're cynical.
Exactly. It's hard.
I get it. And believe me, Virginia fans are often the same way, although they had many years where they just knew they were going to lose. So now they're kind of like waffling between those two mindsets. Like, are they good? Are they not good? Are they going to lose? So they don't quite know. But I think, for Illinois, Brett Bielema being in his second year, that goes a long way, right? To establishing the culture, to establishing the roster, to having people comfortable. So to me, it's a very, very different game than last year's game. Doesn't mean Virginia can't win it. Doesn't mean really anything as far as outcome, but I think it's a very different game. I think last year's tape is not very valuable, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing Illinois has failed to do is win a big important game when you know it's important. Last week against Indiana, it happened. So this is kind of another chance for Illinois to be like, hey, we lose a heartbreaker at Indiana. And now we get a Virginia team that killed us last year, but we have a chance to go, 2-1 in our first 3 games.
Yeah. Tony Elliott mentioned that, like if you're Illinois, you should be very motivated for this game because of what happened last year. And even though it's got nothing to do with Tony Elliott and very little to do really with this year's roster, like you should be motivated. And if you want this year to be different than last year, and if you're saying that year 2 under Coach Bielema is better, this is a great game to show it because you played this team last year. And it'll be interesting. I'll be curious how both teams come out. I'll be curious if UVA is a little overwhelmed first time on the road. There's some things for a new head coach operationally, play calling, all that's a challenge on the road. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong, I feel like, for both these teams.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, man. Well, that's all we got for you. Mike Barber from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
Good luck on Saturday.
See you later.
Awesome. You guys too. Enjoy it.
See ya.
All right. Mike Barber, Virginia beat reporter. Cool guy, knows what he's talking about, but like a lot of, stuff I've read from Virginia, it just seems like he doesn't know the team that well.
Doesn't know the team too well, but what he does know is that Brandon Armstrong is a stud, but he understands that the depth, he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So this Virginia team, it's gutted compared to other Bronco Mendenhall teams. He thinks it's going to be a close game. He sounds like he's leaning towards Illinois. And it's interesting how they're changing the offense. I mean, that offense was lethal last year with Armstrong. 49 against BYU, 42 against Illinois, scoring 40 points in the ACC. I guess they just don't trust the defense.
Yeah.
And I guess Armstrong's that good where he can adjust as a quarterback.
Well, if you couldn't tell, he didn't know many of the offensive players or what they could do. At running back, that Paris Jones go for 104 yards. He was 1 yard behind Armstrong for the Cavalier lead last week. Didn't have a ton to say about Paris Jones. Then at the receiving core, he mentioned Davis and Wicks. Didn't even talk about their second leading receiver. So it really seems like they just haven't seen enough out of their, key skill position guys to get a real read on them. And like you said, the defense was bad last year, and you don't know how much better it can be this year.
Yeah, and Richmond, that's not a good game to compare. Like Illinois, we beat Wyoming by 32. That's a pretty good score. But did that really showcase anything for Indiana? It's the same thing with them with Richmond.
Yeah.
Coming into this week, it's Power 5 versus Power 5. And Illinois has already played the Power 5 school. They've played Wyoming. They're at home. And it seems like Chase Brown is going to have a very, very favorable matchup this weekend.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, we've talked about it. When Illinois was, quote unquote, preparing for Wyoming, they kind of prepared for Indiana at the same time. And we saw that. They had a bunch of yards and their defensive game plan was good against Indiana. They just didn't execute. So you wonder if Virginia's in the same boat. But like you said, it benefits Illinois that they played a Power 5 team in Indiana. They went and played on the road, and you hit on it. Chase Brown's looking at the field day.
Yeah, he's going to have a field day, but it's going to be important for DeVito to make the good reads, to make the deep passes. And Isaiah Williams, in that wide receiver core, the drops probably have to go away. Because if this Illinois team can keep Armstrong off the field and you can just run for 6 yards a pop against this Virginia defense, Illinois could probably win this game by a couple scores.
Armstrong reminds me of a polished Adrian Martinez.
You think so?
Got to keep him off the field because he can beat you with your legs. He can beat you over the middle, and he can beat you with deep balls to the receiver. So he can really do it all. Like you said, there's no doubt in my mind Armstrong's going to be the best player on the field offensively, at least. So if you keep him off the field, whether it be long runs from Chase Brown, our receiving course cleaning up and catching balls. When we were moving the ball against Indiana, it wasn't huge plays, right? It was more 7, 8, 12-yard passes, a little bit, kind of reminded me of a Mike Leach air raid offense for a little bit. I don't want to go too far to describe it as that, but that's kind of how we did it, right? Yeah. Runs and short passes that killed them. That's the key to success against Virginia, because keeping Armstrong off the field is the way to win the game.
Yeah, and you're going to keep him off, but Chase Brown probably can't get 36 carries again.
No.
I think they're going to make a point of probably capping it off at 25 carries.
I like that Tom Allen sort of said, we really prepped for Chase Brown, and he still had 200 yards or just about. So I do like that. But another thing that, has got to be polished is the throwing game. Like DeVito was good last week. I think he had a good game. Interceptions can't happen.
No.
Overthrown balls can't happen, because the second you turn it over, that's when Armstrong is just licking his lips.
I don't know what the right word is to describe DeVito's, performance. It seemed like he lost concentration in the fourth quarter.
A little bit.
It wasn't as clean. I don't think he was making the good decisions.
Yeah.
The one thing I always said with DeVito is that he doesn't force those weird passes. He didn't really throw interceptions at Syracuse. But in that fourth quarter, he was really missing those targets. And that was a costly interception.
It was just really weird because he'd be driving and, having such a good drive for 4 or 5 plays. But then, you see your guy running across the middle. It's a big moment. It's a night game on the road. It's almost just like he got ahead of himself and either, overthrew Williams for an incompletion once. I think he missed Hightower on the side once. And then, of course, the interception where he threw behind Isaiah. Now, it wasn't the worst pass in the world. Probably would have been an incompletion 75% of the time, but stuff like that's going to happen. He didn't throw an interception the whole rest of the game. And then fumbling too. Illinois fumbled the ball once last week and had a turnover. So a key to this game, I think, on both sides is not turning the ball over, because last week Armstrong had an interception and one of their receivers fumbled and lost one too. So turnovers are going to be a huge key.
Yeah, fumbles are big. If this team, he thinks Virginia's going to play conservative defense, not really going to dial up a lot of pressure. Sound like Indiana. Bend but don't break, give up a lot of yards and then get really good in the end zone. But I could see this team Indiana probably has a better defensive line than Virginia. Sounds like Virginia is rebuilding a lot. So it's possible that Illinois just runs out the clock.
Yeah.
Reggie Love gets, 15 productive carries. Chase Brown gets 25. Maybe DeVito, a little bit of leg action. That really sparked the offense last week at times.
I was going to say, we saw DeVito with the huge scramble on a 3rd and long last week for a first down. So I think you're right. No, it's weird because it's not like Virginia's looking at Indiana and be like, hey, they weren't super, bold on defense last week and they won. No, Virginia's doing this because that's the strength of their defense, right?
Yeah.
They're just a little bit conservative. I'd argue that's a benefit for Illinois. They saw it last week in Indiana. Even though they're, a ton of transfers similar to Virginia, maybe more experienced on defense than Virginia, maybe better. So I really like that Illinois saw that last week and, help them prepare for a better team in Virginia this week, but they're at home and they've seen it before.
They're at home. Brett needs this game. To go 1-2, that would be disastrous for Illinois. The bowl game's probably out the picture.
Yeah.
Because looking back, Indiana probably going to be a 5-7 team, and Virginia's in the ACC. They might compete for the Coastal, but with a gutted defense, replacing a bunch of offensive linemen, lack of depth at the wide receiver position. This is a game where you have to roll up your sleeves and win. Yeah, they have a great quarterback, but that's one guy.
Yeah, no, I think that, we didn't talk about it on the podcast. We've talked a ton about it on the radio this past week. Indiana was disappointing. I was at the game. They broke my heart, just especially because I was there. It was a tough game to watch because there were so many opportunities to win. But if you turn around and beat a probably better Virginia team at home to go 2-1 for your first 3 games, the fan base is back.
Yeah, it's going to be good. You got a score prediction? What do you think?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I think I am going to take Illinois. I drank the Kool-Aid a couple of weeks ago and I've continued to sip on it. I think I'm going to take 31-27 Illinois.
31-27. I'm going to go 28-25.
Yeah. I like it.
Something like that.
It's going to be close. I agree with Mike. I think Mike said Illinois by 3 points or something like that. So I think we're all pretty much in the same boat here.
But we could see them lose.
We absolutely could. If Illinois decides to shoot themselves in the foot again, this could be 38-21 or 17.
It's so similar to Indiana. Indiana's got the good quarterback that can throw the deep ball. Well, Armstrong can too. So Chase Brown fumbles, wide receivers are dropping passes. It's going to be Indiana round 2.
I'm not a betting man in college football, but I'm guessing that people are going to see the over and take it.
Yeah.
There's going to be points scored. And if there's not points scored, that's a problem. That's where, your concerns come in. But I think it's going to be a relatively high scoring game. See if Walters, after seeing him last year and getting an improved defense, can have a better plan for Armstrong. It's going to be a real test. Is the biggest game in Bielema's tenure so far.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that'll do it for today's episode. We will be back for a recap pod after Illinois' game against Virginia. From Carson and Josh, this has been the Daily Illini Sports Podcast.